What made you say frick this shit I'm out? Went to a pub because a friend kept asking. When I got there, he was with a group of people I didn't know, so I introduced myself and got the next round. As I come back with the tray, I hear them saying something along the lines of why is that bitch still here? I thought she was just supposed to drop off a bicycle? Yeah, we don't want her to come to this other town with more pubs, and now she is drinking with us? She's so dumb proceeds to imitate and ridicule me as I was actively listening and nodding when I was having a conversation with my friend. Gave the beer to random people and walked right out after saying good evening to my friend and briefly explaining I did not appreciate being tricked into being a bicycle taxi for people who hate me directly after meeting me. I used to work retail and after 7 years at the company, I found out I was only making 50 cents more an hour than someone who just started yesterday. I understood if they couldn't pay me more and asked for a good schedule. 7 to 3 or 8 to 4 every day and the same 2 days off every week. I didn't even ask for weekends off. I was told that they couldn't give me a good schedule so I quit. A coworker waited until we were in front of a large group of people to start disciplining me for something wrong I did. I took my lunch 15 minutes late to help another coworker, when she wasn't even my supervisor. Applied for a job transfer the next day and couldn't be happier where I am now. Got strung along for a promotion for over a year, interviewing multiple times for it. Did not get the promotion, then later found out the one who did had been selected months prior. Got back from a vacation I had planned months in advance only to hear that the team was angry at me for taking time off when we were in the middle of a big project. People I respected started talking shit behind my back. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I put in my 2 weeks the next day. Flying for work. Seems glamorous at first but it freaking sucks. I'd leave my house on Sunday at like 2 p.m. to go work and return to get home on Saturday morning at 1 a.m. Every week. For months at a time. Then a new project would happen and I'd be somewhere else. Previous boss pushed for me, and my team to work a ton of overtime, and promoted to come in on Saturday and will take care of you offer. Cue me and my team doing prep work at 5 a.m. Saturday for a week-long function starting on Monday. We're a little cranky but the coffee is kicking in. The boss comes in, and thanks us all for volunteering to come in. One of our more vocal crew says I don't mind, I need the overtime, I want to buy a PS5. Boss man turns around and says oh we won't be paying you any overtime, illegal in my country, you're all volunteering for this, but we will make sure you get a wonderful lunch. Cue basically everyone saying frick this shit, I'm out. In about 5 minutes, our team of 40 put down everything, put all the food back in storage and left. I found nudes of his ex, from 10 years ago, that I'd previously asked him twice to get rid of tucked in a pair of my socks. Our couples counselor asked why he'd kept them and he said, you know. In case I ever needed to blackmail her, he said it like it was a perfectly normal and reasonable thing to plan to do. The therapist and I locked eyes and I noped the frick out of there and moved out. They cut my hours so I had to get a second job. 3 days before I was supposed to start said second job, my manager at the main job told me that I couldn't get this second job because I had main job first and I needed to make it my priority. That's when I said frick you and left. I didn't even give a notice, I literally just sent an email saying I wouldn't be coming in the next day, grabbed my shit and went home. Had a grad interview, turns out the interviewer/HR lady wasn't there that day and didn't notify me. 40 minutes late the workshop manager asked what I was doing here and after telling him why I was there, he proceeded to carry out the interview himself instead. Interview went well, however I got an email the day after from the same lady who was meant to interview me saying I guess you didn't want this job if you aren't gonna show up to the interview. Responded politely and got an offer 2 weeks later lol. Ain't no way I even considered taking that job. I was on my boat fishing for bass. I casted out my line and watched the lure hit the water but the line just floated in the air. Lightning and thunder crashed and the line fell to the water. Frick this shit, I'm out. I visited a friend's house for the first time. He had 2 bathrooms. He also told me to use the other bathroom, as if I knew which one he meant. Nature called, went to the nearest bathroom, locked the door, opening the toilet lid and there was a motherfricking beehive there. Went to a camp for cadets couple years ago. Got the top bunk thinking it was gonna be a fun time. Turns out the ceiling was filled with hundreds of spiders. I hid under the blankets the entire time spent there. I had a job working 13-hour night shifts at a factory, and did well enough that after a few months, I was promoted to a line operator position in charge of 8 to 12 people. To do my job well, I had to arrive to my line early to do paperwork, safety check machinery, place material requisition orders, etc. The company that owned the factory demanded that their workers park at an external lot a few miles away from the factory, and then take a shuttle in. The issue I had was that the earliest shuttle arrived about 40 minutes after the time I needed to hit my line. I spoke to floor management, as well as the people at my staffing agency, for months about this incongruity, and no solution was offered, so with their tacit approval, I parked a few blocks away, and walked in. This worked for about 6 months, and in that time, I had grown to be one of the best producers, often doubling production quotas for the shift and generally being well liked by my crew and coworkers. After one particularly excellent shift, I received a text from my staffing agency stating that because I did not take the shuttle, my pay was getting docked, losing about $50 per shift. I called the agency several times over the next several days to explain that it was impossible to take the shuttle and do my job, but did not get a response. Finally, with 2 hours left before my next shift, I sent a text to the agency and management team stating that a compromise could not be reached, and that I was resigning, effective immediately. Of course, then I get calls back, with promises to amend the pay docking if I return, and how much of a shame it would be to waste so much training and expertise, etc. I felt that if a company had to be stung into finally taking action, that I was either such an insignificant cog in their machine, or they were being poorly run, so I thanked them for their time and consideration, and committed to my resignation. I still feel badly that I never got a chance to say goodbye to my coworkers, as I had gotten to know many of them quite well, but sending that resignation notice was still an immensely gratifying experience. Just quit my job this morning. Started with the company 4 years ago and quickly moved up. Took an exciting role, trained, then COVID hit. Role completely changed, we worked from home, everything was great. Part of my job was ordering phones, laptops, and accessories for employees. The supply chain shortage quickly made it difficult to have hardware arrive on time. I was continuously blamed for this, even though there was literally nothing I could do. New laptops now taking 2 months to arrive with new hires starting in 2 weeks, sometimes less. Ended up receiving a poor review, because I couldn't consistently meet the order requirements. Cut my merit bonus and raise by 25%. At this point, my morale was gone. They then forced me to come back to the office, even though the rest of my team continues to work from home. They complained that I wear earbuds while I work, because I can't stand the sound of my manager's Darth Vader breathing. I have ADHD. They began telling me that they were looking to move me to another role. Tried offering me a lesser role, and that if I did not take it, they would manage me out and it would get ugly. I quit today, no notice. They are scrambling right now, and I sleep at ease knowing how much work they will have to do to cover me. My first ever job was at a Korean grocery store in the USA. I made it very clear I don't speak any languages other than English. I stressed this multiple times during my interview. They said it was fine, I would just be doing stocking, don't need to know the language. 3 weeks and I got absolutely screamed at for not being able to read Korean. I'm talking like the kind of screaming that damages your throat. I told them to frick themselves and walked out in the middle of my shift. Finding peeled potatoes in a pot of water under a sink and cooked chicken sitting unwrapped in a pot overnight for the next day. Yeah, I quit that place. My wife started doing hard drugs, sleeping with other men and despitting me being an idiot and wanting to work it out. She continued to sleep with the guy and said she was in love with him. My old job that I just quit like 2 days ago. They wanted me to work meat department, stock lunch meat, and clean the butchery after the butchers went home for the day, and on top of that I had to work grocery stock all for $11 an hour. I quit the next day after they told me I wasn't getting any type of raise. When I say work meat department, I basically trade up the meat and wrapped it and put it out in the coolers. I worked in the final inspection station at a factory. They had a third-party company do a bunch of measurements with gauges because the rest of the factory kept making mistakes. This was before I started working there. I was able to inspect over 100 output carriers an hour, and when a mistake got through, it was never one I had looked at. We had to put dots in certain spots on the carriers to indicate we had checked for mistakes that had made it to Ford, so it was easy to tell who checked the part. But they decided, one day, to get rid of the third-party company and give all those gauges, 20 more than I already had, to my station. Made sense, saved the company money, and they shouldn't have to rely on another company to do them. They didn't give us much training. Basically just what the proper numbers were, but not really how to measure them properly. But adding so many gauges really slowed us down. We're talking maybe 30 parts an hour. Made sense because they was roughly how fast the third-party company was able to check all those same measurements. Management got pissed though. Kept coming around and asking why the numbers were so small. First couple of times I told them we were trying. After a week, I got really upset. Told them to look at all the shit we have to do now with only the same 2 people as before. Either make another station for the gauges or get us a third guy. Well, they could only spare a third guy when another part of the factory had no work. But that rarely happened and they kept getting mad. Then we lost half our workforce to another factory and I was down to just myself. It was bullshit. They just kept getting more and more upset because when I got backed up it fricked over the whole factory. Last straw was when the boss I liked yelled at me about the fact nothing on the line was moving. I just didn't show up to work ever again. I was a fantastic worker at this little gift card store. I trained the managers and used to go in on my days off to help out. Then I got pretty sick, conjunctivitis, both eyes, and an inner ear infection. I couldn't see, couldn't tell which way was up, and was very contagious. I had to get my mom to dial the manager's number for me cause I couldn't see the phone, so I couldn't come in for one shift, and my boss chewed me out and said, well, I'm going to miss my son's soccer practice all because you don't feel like coming in. I was like, yeah, and hung up. Quit when I got better. Walking late at night, on my way to home, when suddenly I heard an ominous child laugh. I ran as fast as I could and never turned to look back. She lined my bed with broken glass, put the blankets over it, and I dove on in. Lol. Working as a waiter, made $180 in tips one night. Due to our tip share program, over $100 of it went to the bus boys, even though I had to bus my own tables. Not their fault, we were swamped. But I asked my manager why I'm paying someone else to do a job that I'm doing myself. He couldn't give me a straight answer, so I walked. Started a new job in my field, turns out to be nothing like I was told it would be. Wanted us reading from scripts, calling people on our personal phones for hours a day in a windowless room in the basement of an office building. Went on lunch the second day and decided I'd never step foot in that office ever again. Worked for 2 days and quit. Went back to my previous job where the money and hours aren't great, but at least I look forward to seeing my amazing co-workers every day, and do something that I at least enjoy enough to not be miserable. Needless to say, nobody from that company ever returned my email. They knew what they were doing and how wrong it was. I'm a truck driver, and whenever I deliver to a certain supercenter, one of the ladies there tells me that either I am too late or too early whenever I get there. The last time she told me every week. I finally told them yesterday that they need to get a specified time that can be given to me in writing, or I'm just going to start bypassing them and taking their product after they tell me that 4 a.m. is not a good enough time. I had not actually started working yet, I was being interviewed. I'm an executive chef. I was interviewing for a position at a hotel. I asked to see the kitchen and we proceeded into the very depths of hell. There was grease dripping from the grease traps. Underneath the grease traps is a rail that is supposed to catch what runs off the grease traps. At the ends and midsection are pans that catch grease from the rail. On the floor beneath each of the pans was a 6-inch pile of blackish yellow congealed grease. The backs of the fryers were also gunked up with blackish yellow congealed grease. It looked like it hadn't been swept, much less mopped, underneath any of the equipment in months. The smell in the walk-in was obnoxious, and I could see rotting tomatoes, grapes, and lemons setting on the shelf, almost front and center. The freezer wasn't as bad, but still wasn't great. The interior and exterior of the dish machine had mineral deposits, lime, and blackish green stuff, mold, caked all over it. I can't imagine how bad the water pressure was. The backsplash was nasty, too. I can't imagine I hid the shock from my face. I sure wasn't trying. The food director asked me with all sincerity, "So, interested in the job?" No apologies for the state of the kitchen nor explanations. I laughed, that kind of short laugh that's almost a bark. That's when she went into this song and dance about how she can't keep any staff, they're always quitting on her, lazy and yada yada. I found out there were no other kitchen employees, not even a dishwasher, they had all quit. There wasn't even a server. The only other staff on premises besides hotel staff was an independently owned bar that had a contract with the hotel to use the kitchen for bar food and only had a small pass window between the kitchen and bar, not even employee access. They had to walk out into the lobby like anyone else if they wanted to come to the kitchen. I walked out. I saw more than enough red flags for a bad boss. I give a kitchen the white glove treatment before I let staff go home. Missed a spot in the microwave? Wipe it. A lemon wedge against the wall underneath the stoves? Get it out. Rotten tomatoes in the walk-in? Toss in the garbage. Floor feeling a little gritty or streaked with gray? Grab the buckets and mops and assume the position. Former close friend cheated on his wife, got divorced, already had a drinking problem that went off the rails, and started doing coke. This was all around the time I got a new job and was up at 7 o'clock every day. Having to bail early or not being able to hang out was met with claims that I wasn't a good friend or that no one wanted to hang out with him anymore. I tried to be there for him cause he was clearly in a bad place. Once I realized he was content making me feel like shit every time we saw each other, I just stopped replying to his messages. Took less than 2 weeks for him to stop texting. When he said, "Let me see your chesticles." One of my first jobs was working in a chain family restaurant. Did it for about a year until one of the kitchen staff slapped my ass. Was gobsmacked at first but naively tried to shake it off and hoped to God it never happened again, considering I told him to piss off, but it deeply freaked me out. Obviously the prick laughed about it to his other kitchen staff mates because a week later a different one did it. Felt sick to my stomach because shit like this happened in school. It's a real feeling that you don't matter and that you're just a vessel to be touched. Felt powerless until a few days later I was in one room and one of the chefs came in as I was alone, stood behind me and full on groped me. I thought, yeah, frick this, I'm out. Everyone there were one big family who'd worked together for years and I knew the supervisor was besties with them all. So I went above her to the head exec guy who happened to be visiting our chain/branch that week. Told him straight up what was happening. Given I was only about 19 or 20 at the time and I happened to know he had daughters my age, That frickin' legend of a guy looked horrified and told me to leave it with him. Found out he pulled all of the kitchen staff in for a meeting, rinsed their asses and told them if any of them ever touches a female member of staff again they're immediately fired. I left a few days later. I hope they never touched a single staff member again, most of them were young girls. Bye bitches. Selling expensive knives to an impoverished single mother with a pregnant teenage daughter via an MLM operation. I started a second job, food service. They scheduled me for 4-hour shifts with one 10-minute break, but every shift ended up being 6 hours with one 10-minute break. I didn't need extra cash enough to tolerate labor law violations. I was in Australia on a gap year/working holiday visa and I was struggling a bit. I managed to get contact details for collecting for a charity. When I went over to the address, it was a guy's apartment. That's cool, lots of people work out of their house. Anyways, he made me a badge, and gave me a donation tin, but apparently, I couldn't just stand in a mall and collect from folk passing by. I had to go into businesses and ask the folk who worked there for donations. The deal was that I'd keep half of whatever was collected. After popping into a couple of shops, I went to get a drink and a sandwich, put on my card, not from the tin, and while I was sat eating it, I had a moment of clarity. I was basically begging for money, and it didn't feel right taking half the collection from a charity tin. At that point I was like, nope, I'm out. As I didn't really want to face the guy, yeah, I was weak, I ended up heading to his apartment, left the collection tin and badge, after taking my photo out of it, outside his door, rang the bell, and bravely ran away. Ended up getting work in a hostel as a maintenance guy and minibus driver for accommodation and pay, and vowed that any work I do for a charity in the future will be for one that I, or my friends, care about and it'll all go to the charity. A person I was friends with stopped appreciating my time and effort, so I stopped trying to be friends. She would occasionally talk to me in an abrasive manner and I'd reply back with the same energy. She wonders why. My ex-wife had been in rehab for alcohol, for the third or fourth time, then staying with her sister for a few days before catching the train back home, and I was picking her up. She'd gotten drunk on the train ride. I knew right then that I was done. Friend invited me to a party he was really excited to go to in college. We were in our mind-expanding college days and he made it sound like there would be a lot of fun things to do. We showed up and the whole room was filled with people tripping on ketamine. Bunch of zombies chatting away about nothing and zonked on the couch and floor. Some girl came up to me without introduction and was having what I believe may have been the most meaningful conversation she has had in her life about her middle school days and preferences in types of friends at that age, while staring intensely at my shoes. I looked over at my homie and was like, we need to get the frick out of here. Later date took a girlfriend back to my small hometown after talking about how fricking charming and magical it was to grow up there, walk through the doors of one of the only decent bars in town, just in time to see a skinny redneck get fricking body slammed into a table by a fat redneck while some girl was ugly crying and wailing. I literally just said, oh frick this, grabbed her hand, turned around and walked out. This happened when I was in second grade, walked into my school's restroom. And what do you know? There's shit in the sink. Not even joking. Actual shit that comes out of your ass in the sink. One of my former employers scheduled a mandatory meeting with us, told us how great we all were, how much more he paid us compared to other places, which was a lie, and how much he appreciated us. He then proceeded to go on a rant about how he wasn't going to tolerate any funny business, how he could fire any of us anytime he wanted, and how there were a lot of people out there that wanted our job. I immediately started looking for another job. Took a job on the production line at a local food factory. Despite being told by friends that I would struggle because I was English and more than 95% of the workforce was Eastern European, but when you're on universal credit you'll take any job going just to get off it. Took 3 weeks of verbal abuse before I ended up having a panic attack, and I quit that evening. The place is now having to advertise for staff in places up to 2 hours driving distance away, because the work culture is still so toxic that nobody local will work there. When employees are hanging up and bullying coworkers they don't like, the boss asks who started it, until I spoke up. It was extremely racist. 3 black chicks against a white chick. The white chick was accused of being a racist, and suspended. She didn't get fired because I defended her. Needless to say, she quit a week later. Don't ever work in that type of a toxic workplace. Stupid cunt HR lady replied with an extremely dismissive email to my documentation of workplace safety issues that violated state OSHA rules, which I cited in my complaint. I just rage quit about an hour before my next shift. Morbid ideations. Really eye-opening when you may have thoughts like these once in a blue moon, then it's monthly, then it's weekly, then every other day. Luckily, I actually met a doctor I felt comfortable around and just decided to spill it to them and got put on the hard road to recovery. Worked at a buffet by a pool. One day we found out the meat we were supposed to use that day was greenish and smelled like eggs. Called our boss, he told us to wash it well. We did. Didn't help, so we called him again. He got mad, and told us to use it anyways. When we refused, he came over, just to check if the meat is really that bad. Then he got mad that we found out it's bad, and left. My fiancé's story, not mine. So he worked at the local branch of UPS and his boss was a complete a-hole. Total douche all the time. One of those I'm in charge so everything I say goes even when it's stupid and wastes time kind of people. Kissed the other boss's ass so hard he could literally get away with anything. Anyway, my fiancé sprained his ankle really badly loading trucks one day. He went to work the next day as per usual and told his bosses that he was injured and would be slower than normal. All good, right? I mean, he showed up with a freaking brace on, it was hurting him so bad. His a-hole boss decided that he didn't like that my fiancé was being slow, so he gave him 3 extra trucks, on top of the 7 he already had to do. Now my fiancé worked night shifts so he got paid well, which is the only reason he put up with the guy's crap so long. But being told that he was moving too slowly and had to do extra work while injured after everything else his boss had done just pissed him off too badly. He immediately walked to his supervisor's office and said, "Because of boss doing this, I'm putting in my 2 weeks. You can't change my mind, you know I'm sick of his crap." He never looked back.